Most people don't feel like they're trying to live an expensive life. They're not constantly upgrading everything, they're not chasing luxury, and they're not making extreme financial decisions on purpose. They're just trying to live what used to feel like a normal, stable life. Pay rent, buy groceries, cover bills, maybe save a little, and occasionally enjoy something small without feeling guilty. Nothing unrealistic, nothing excessive, just normal. And yet, in 2026, that version of normal feels heavier than it used to. Not because people suddenly became irresponsible, but because the structure of everyday life quietly became more expensive. And when everything becomes slightly more expensive at the same time, it doesn't feel like one big problem. It feels like constant pressure that never fully goes away. That's the key difference. This doesn't feel like a crisis moment. It feels like a slow squeeze, a steady tightening of your financial space where nothing is dramatically wrong, but nothing feels comfortable either. Your money still comes in, your bills still get paid, but your margin, the space between what you earn and what you spend, feels smaller than it should. And that shrinking margin is what people are reacting to when they say the cost of living feels unbearable. It's not always about being broke. It's about feeling like your money doesn't stretch the way it used to. It's about feeling like your income is constantly being absorbed by things that used to feel manageable. If you look closely, this pressure usually comes from multiple directions at once. The most obvious one is everyday essentials. Groceries cost more, transportation costs more, rent or housing expenses are higher, utilities, insurance, basic services, all of these have increased in ways that are noticeable, but not always dramatic enough on their own to explain the full feeling. But when all of them rise together, they change the entire system, because now your income isn't just covering your life, it's trying to keep up with it. And that's where the stress begins. Because when your money has to work harder just to maintain the same lifestyle, everything starts to feel tighter. You hesitate more before spending, you think twice about small decisions, you notice your balance more often, and even when you're technically doing fine, it doesn't feel like it. That feeling is important because it shows that the issue isn't just numbers, it's structure. And structure becomes even more complicated when you factor in lifestyle baseline. Over time, what feels normal for you changes. You get used to certain standards, certain comforts, certain ways of doing things, not because you're trying to be extravagant, but because those things gradually become part of your routine. Maybe you rely more on convenience. Maybe you upgraded small parts of your life over time. Maybe you added subscriptions, services, or habits that made life easier. None of these decisions feel dramatic, but together they slowly raise the cost of what normal feels like. And once your baseline increases, it doesn't easily go back down. That's why people feel stuck, because their life now requires more money to maintain than it did before, even if they don't feel like they're living any differently. At the same time, there's another layer that makes this even more difficult: invisible spending. A lot of modern expenses are not obvious. They're not big one-time purchases that stand out. They're small, recurring, often automatic payments that blend into the background. Subscriptions, digital services, convenience spending, small upgrades, and repeated daily habits that don't feel significant individually. But together, they create a constant outflow that reduces your flexibility. And because these expenses are scattered across your life, they're harder to notice. You don't feel like you're overspending, you just feel like your money disappears faster than expected. That's what makes this situation so frustrating, because it doesn't feel like you're making a clear mistake you can fix. It feels like you're doing everything reasonably and still not getting the result you expected. And then there's debt. For many people, the rising cost of living hasn't just made things tighter, it's pushed them to rely more on credit. Credit cards, financing options, pay-later systems, these tools make it possible to keep up in the short term, but they also add pressure in the long term. Because once debt enters your system, part of your future income is already committed to your past spending. That means your current income is no longer fully available to support your current life, and that makes everything feel even heavier. Now, you're not just paying for today, you're also paying for yesterday, And when both of those pressures exist at the same time, your margin shrinks even further. This is why even people with decent incomes are starting to feel uncomfortable, because the issue isn't just how much you earn, it's how much your life costs to maintain, and how much pressure is being placed on your income from different directions. When costs rise, baseline rises, and debt adds another layer on top, the system becomes tight, and tight systems feel stressful. Even small disruptions start to matter more. A slightly higher bill, an unexpected expense, a slower month. Things that used to be manageable now feel heavier because there's less room to absorb them. That's what makes the cost of living feel unbearable, not just the numbers, but the lack of breathing room. Because breathing room is what makes money feel comfortable. It's what allows you to make decisions without stress. It's what lets you handle unexpected situations without everything falling apart. It's what creates a sense of stability. And when that breathing room disappears, even a stable income can feel unstable. That's why a lot of people are trying to solve this problem by earning more. And while earning more can help, it doesn't always fix the core issue. Because if your baseline continues to rise along with your income, the pressure doesn't go away. You just move everything to a higher level. You earn more, but you also spend more. Your life expands, your expectations adjust, and your margin stays the same. That's why some people experience a surprising realization. They make more money than they used to, but they don't feel better financially. Because the system didn't get lighter, it just got bigger. And this is where a different approach becomes important. Instead of only focusing on increasing income, it becomes necessary to look at the structure of your financial life. Where is your money actually going? Which parts of your spending are essential and which parts have quietly become automatic? Where has your baseline increased without you fully noticing? Which expenses are adding real value and which ones are just maintaining a habit? These questions are not about cutting everything out, they're about understanding your system. Because once you understand your system, you can start making adjustments that actually reduce pressure. Sometimes that means removing low-value recurring costs. Sometimes it means being more intentional about convenience. Sometimes it means resisting unnecessary upgrades. And sometimes it means simply being more aware of patterns that used to run in the background. None of these changes are dramatic on their own, but together they can create something powerful: margin. And margin is what people are really missing right now. It's what makes your income feel enough. It's what makes your financial life feel manageable instead of overwhelming. It's what turns constant pressure into stability. Because in 2026, the problem isn't just that life is more expensive, it's that the space between income and expenses has become smaller. And when that space shrinks, everything feels heavier. So if the cost of living feels unbearable, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing everything wrong. It often means you're operating inside a system that has quietly become more expensive and less flexible. And once you see that clearly, the solution becomes less about chasing more money and more about rebuilding a system that doesn't require so much of it just to feel normal again.